But Sy is not only a distinguished director and scholar, he is a friend to all those who enter the doors of the Albright. For those of us who have been privileged to know him for many years, our lives have been enriched by his kindness, his erudition, and his humor. Sy is the first to offer sympathy and support in the face of a crisis or tragedy. He is a loyal friend to the staff of the Albright. No one who knows him can forget his deep affection for Saeed Frej, Omar Jabreen, or Munira Saeed, all long-term employees of the Institute. He has been a mentor to the countless young fellows who have come through the Albright, many of whom, not so young anymore, are here in the audience tonight. We don't want to forget Sy's humor. I'll never forget watching him stand in the middle of the Albright courtyard during the first rain of winter, holding his arms straight out and shouting in glee, "I'm a tree! I'm a tree!" Or who could forget Sy striding along the balks at Mickney, tossing hacks to the hot, thirsty volunteers. Or finally, leading the guests at the Christmas lunch at the Albright in a rousing chorus of White Christmas. It was Sy who does so much to make the Albright a home away from home for so many. I was told very strictly I had 2 minutes to speak, and so I'm going to stop. And please enjoy this evening as we raise our glasses in honor of our Director and Professor of Archaeology, Sy Gitin.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to be with you, and being here and looking around the room here in Baltimore, you know, in a sense, this is where it all began. We're in Baltimore. We're at Johns Hopkins. Many of you were at Hopkins last night, and we remember, you know, that in a sense, our story as family, as the Albright family, starts at Johns Hopkins. So it's very appropriate that we're here. And I want to invite Susan Ackerman to give a few remarks on behalf of ASOR. Susan.
Well, as many of you know, I teach at Dartmouth College, so Sy, I bring you warm greetings from New Hampshire. Actually, as Mark said, my task is to bring greetings on behalf of ASOR. But in point of fact, the way I know Sy the best is from my service on the Albright Board of Trustees, at which Sy begins every one of his biannual director reports, 65 in total, he told us today, with the phrase, "I bring you warm greetings from Jerusalem." Now, more specifically, I have served on the Albright Board as its secretary. And as its secretary, I want to confirm something that many of you know already. Sy is an expert at fast talking. By which I mean not just that Sy can talk you into just about anything, although he can, like giving your last dollar to the Albright, but also that Sy talks really fast. And I take notes at the Albright board meetings the old-fashioned way with a pen, and my hand never hurts so much as it does when we come to the end of one of Sy's director reports, and I have had to transcribe all of those minutes. So Sy, although my role tonight is to speak on behalf of ASOR, I also speak for many, many Albright secretaries, past and future, when I say that no one of us will miss your fast talk. But all of us, secretaries and everyone else, will miss almost everything else about you. We'll miss your passionate devotion to the Albright, to its fellows, and to its educational program. We'll miss your encyclopedic knowledge on things ranging from Iron Age incense altars to the most detailed minutia of Israel pension plans. We'll miss your years of dedicated service and your fast-talking fundraising on behalf of the Albright. And yes, we will miss those warm greetings from Jerusalem. So, Sy, now speaking on behalf of ASOR, I do hope that even though you are retiring, you'll keep bringing those warm greetings to us at our ASOR meetings for many years to come. Thank you.
I'm Dan Wolk, a longtime friend of Sy's and Sherry's and a wonderful family. And I would like to say that I met Sy in a rather strange way, or our friendship began in a rather strange way, in 1959 when I had just graduated from college and was going to Hebrew Union College. Sy was at Hebrew Union College, and I really didn't know him, but I had a speaking engagement in Nazareth, and we went there for Christmas Eve and went to church in Nazareth on Christmas Eve. And I thought it was rather interesting that two rabbinical students would spend their Christmas Eve in church in Nazareth. But since that's where it all began, I guess that's appropriate. I often brought groups of people tours to Israel, and Sy was always kind enough to spend time with them in his wonderful, charismatic way. And one of the very early tours, I think there were 18 of us, we tried to decide what to bring to Sy that he could appreciate as a token of Thanksgiving. And the first thought was we would bring him 18 years' supply of Hacks cough drops, but we couldn't find them in the United States. The next thought was to bring him 18 scarves, so he would never be without a scarf, but 18 seemed like a lot. At that time, Sy and I both smoked pipes, and we both smoked Edgeworth tobacco. So we decided the best thing to do was to bring him 18 cans of Edgeworth tobacco. So everybody on this group had a can of Edgeworth tobacco in their suitcase. And for some reason, we were stopped at customs in Israel, and they tried to figure out what we were doing, whether it was something that enriches plutonium or exactly what was in those cans. And if it weren't for the fact that I had explained that it was for archaeological research, we probably never would have gotten in. Well, shortly after we brought those tins, Sy stopped smoking. So I don't know what happened to the tins, but I'm sure they're buried in one of the labs. And 2,000 years from now, when some of you who are younger as archaeologists are digging in the area of the Albright, you'll probably find these cans, and they'll have this word that you have to decipher that says Edgeworth. And once you decipher it and you realize it's tobacco, then there'll, I'm sure, be a number of papers written. For instance, the effect of tobacco smoking on the disappearance of the Philistine culture will probably be one paper. And then there'll be one that highlights Sy's ability, but with one disclaimer. There was a time when the eminent professor and director of the Albright's reputation went up in smoke. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that's my thought. Finally, Sy had a friend, I think it was a roommate, but I'm not sure, at Hebrew Union College. We'll just say his name was Alan. And Alan was a rather eccentric, brilliant, eccentric person. And one day he did a painting, and the painting was labeled white on white. Now, why was it white on white? It was a white canvas with white toothpaste. He painted using toothpaste. Why do I mention this? I mention this because some 33 years ago, Sy Gitin was given a blank canvas of the future years at the Albright, and he's painted it so beautifully, not with toothpaste, although he does get his teeth into everything that he's involved with, but not with toothpaste, but with the resonant colors of his scholarship, his administrative abilities, his creativity in programs, his fundraising, and his total respect for everybody that comes through the Albright, as they in turn respect him. And so Sy, in his own way, has painted a canvas that is not white on white, but it's resonant with color, beautiful colors, and we wish him the very best as he continues to add colors to the ensuing canvas of his years. Sy?
What in the world will we do without Sy? We will all really miss him, and that's not a lie. Like manna from heaven, he descended among us, when back in the day he was still just a young cuss. He knew how to smile, frown, and make other faces, to charm everyone, get in their good graces, thus managed to thrive and keep teachers happy, till they finally consented to make him a rabbi. In his early career, he was briefly an actor, which proved through his life a most formative factor. With Topol, he role-played a lovable tyke with a memorable title, i.e., I Like Mike. But then for some years, he meandered the globe, wandered off to and fro like his Bible friend Job. As a student in Israel, in Alaska, a chaplain. He was taking his time to find out what was happening. Then directing admissions in Sin City Natty, he looked into Bibark so as not to go batty. Under Nelson Glick's wing, he achieved True Believer, only then to get stuck with Bill Deaver and Seeger. Then on to the street of King David, he came to reside there a while as a doc wannabe. But somehow we couldn't make him stay in his carrel. Always sat in the hall there a-visiting Cheryl. During Phase 2 at Gezer, he served as core staff, where his jolly field antics made everyone laugh. But chastised was there as Dame Kate came to gawk for using his trowel to gouge in the balk. In the fullness of time, though, he did find his groove, and the fated day came for him to make his big move. As it turned out, however, he didn't go far, just a ways across the town to the AIAR. Then with Trudy, Pruss Killebrew, and Gitlin and all, off to Telmicna Ekron he followed the call. An Archeo empire there to make in perpetuate, just to learn that Akish and Patti had beat him to it. He worked on through the years with Cardello and Spencer to make real sure 'twas known exactly where all the cents were. However, what always did make him feel giddy were the fundraising gigs worked with Norma and Liddy. With Omar, Munira, Nadia, Hisham, and Faiz, and with Edna and Helena, he kept the place nice. Then with John Camp, Ray Whaley, and Dave Rosenstein, along with Jan Norma Kershaw, made it even more keen. So on Calloway, on Sager, on Miller and White, on Gerstenblith and Dessel, and even Ed Wright. With Scheuer and Mayerson, Farish, Wolk, and Viv Bull, to the cart and the horse he together did pull. To the top of the house, to the top of the wall, until in his own flat he had a great fall. Yet he managed, despite his great plight, to hold all together and still fight the good fight. Which brings us now close to the end of this tale of a man with a boatload of folks he did sail. With his pipe, just like Popeye, he served at the helm to keep business moving as he guided the realm. So now on to retirement doth he sail off the clock, and we bid him farewell as he's leaving the dock. Shouting, quoting singers of note, bid him, oh, ta, ta, ta. Lifting voices together, we love you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And by now, if you're wondering where I got all this trivia, transparency demands, I confess, Wikipedia. And Sy, it would be more ashamed to see you soon retire if it weren't that you're, oh, so much older than I are.
Don't encourage him. I'll begin almost at the beginning, a little after Dan's time. I was on home leave in 1969 from the Jerusalem School at the Cincinnati campus and gave a survey course in archaeology. There were a few students there. Nice young man showed up, very trim, Brooks Brothers suit, full head of dark hair, very charming. I thought he was a rabbi already, dean of students. I thought he'll be a Beverly Hills rabbi. But he persevered in the course, didn't do terribly well, but he was all right. His name was Seymour Gitin. So we began 44 years ago. I've known him almost as long as anyone. Well, when I went back to Jerusalem in the 70s, I came with me, and he's been there ever since. He started at Gezer in 1970, and then later went on to Hebron Hill sites with me, Jebel Kakir, in 1971. He was in charge of the publication program at Hebrew Union College with fellowships that we arranged. You know, I'm able to tell you some stories about Sy and his misguided youth that no one else knows. I'd like to tell you those stories, but I can't. There aren't any. He never did anything but work. He worked so hard we got worried about his health. So one day we sent him off to Herzliya for a week, you know, R&R. He came back the next morning. And he's never tried to rest since then. He didn't pay any attention to anything or anybody except work. But we'd hired a young woman as a receptionist, and she sat there in that glass enclosed space, met everybody, charming young woman, American. And, you know, Norma and I kept saying, you know, she's a lovely girl, she's a little lonely here, ask her out. Well, he never even noticed until he did notice. Now they've been married 38 years and have grandchildren, and Talia is here. So the rest, as they say, is commentary. After I left and went over to the Albright, I continued to visit regularly, Sy continued his work with me. We did seminars together while he did his dissertation, courses at the Hebrew University, and his dissertation became Gezer Volume 3 in due course. Still one of the best studies of the Iron Age pottery of Israel. But again, Sy did nothing but work. And then finally, when I left the Albright to come home in 1970, boy, it was a long time ago. 1971. 75? Oh, well, at my age, you can't remember things. Well, I used to visit the Albright every summer, and, you know, we'd stay in the hostel, and no matter what time you arrived, I would come up from the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning, and Sy was there, of course, in the office, as usual, hollering, Saeed, Saeed, even then. And he would stay until dinner was over, and then come over to the hostel and stay a while longer, you know, and finally we'd say, Sy, go home, you know. And we'd write down his address and his wife's name, so if he hadn't been there for a while, he'd remember where to go, and finally he would go home. But Sy was always there. Amazing. Sy picked up some bad habits from me, and I'm afraid one of them was hacks. I always ate them. them, but eventually the supply ran out. You could only get them in Australia, so I gave up the habit. But Sy somehow managed to smuggle in large quantities of hacks, and despite what Dan said, he never gave any to anybody, never. To this day, they are there at the Albright, where he keeps them, no one knows where. Now, very few people have left their mark on the landscape, very few individuals. But Sy and I went all over the West Bank, and everywhere we went on surveys, he was still eating the hacks, with his own store, of course, and dropping the yellow cellophane wrappers, and they're non-biodegradable, so they're there to this day. And this means Sy was here. So he left his mark. But more importantly, he left another mark on the landscape. In my long experience, I don't know of another case in which a single individual has devoted his whole professional life to an institute and shaped that institute in a way that will never be forgotten. That's what Sy did. And I just want to express my personal appreciation to him, because I feel fortunate, I feel honored to have been there almost from the beginning. We go back 44 years. And during all my trips to Israel, Sy has been my eyes and ears in Israel. I simply could not have done many of the things that I've done without Sy. I think he has mentored every one of my many doctoral students. Most of them have spent a year or more at the Albright, and he's guided them in remarkable ways. Sy's long since become a major player in the archaeology of Israel, and that is his record. That will be remembered. And of course, the 3-volume pottery volume set will be remembered if it ever comes out. He says this every year, next year. But I simply want to remind you of what you know. The easiest thing and the best thing is to say that the Jerusalem School would have closed long ago had it not been for Sy. The other foreign institutes are all gone. Our institute is vibrant, more vibrant than it's been in its more than 100 years of history, and that is due to one man's achievement. So I'm indebted to him. My students are indebted to him. ASOR is indebted to him. American interests in the archaeology of Israel are dedicated to him, and he has shaped our discipline in a most remarkable way. And he's done it his own way, his own unique way. So we want to send Sy off with our esteem and our affection and our deep gratitude. And I would say to him, until 120 years, but I'm afraid he'll still be in the director's office. So I want to wish him well as he takes up his own work with no longer the interruptions and burdens of the past 35 years. And I only have one word of advice. Sy, don't try to rest. It could kill you.
This will be about as long as your tenure was. I swear Bill and I did not confer on this, but beginning sounds about the same. Long, long ago, in the days of yore, Bill, Norma, and Sean lived in the kingdom of Cincinnati. Bill was visiting professor at Hebrew Union College. Norma was doing the volunteer office for the Gezer volunteers, and Sean was just being a 9-month-old baby. One day after Bill had gone to work, the telephone rang, and he said, "I'm going to bring a guest home to dinner tonight, but don't worry, I'll cook." So I thought, well, that's fine. I was so busy, I didn't mind him cooking, so I said, of course, okay. So our guest that evening was a young rabbi who I'd never met before, and he came in, and he was been trying to study archaeology with Nelson Glick, who was never there, so he started working with Bill. That was the first time I met Seymour Gitin, and that was 44 years ago. And in the countless hours that we've spent working on fundraising, working on other projects, and just visiting, I'm not sure that I really know Sy. First, let me say that he is wonderful. That much I do know. But a few years ago, before Sy was married, I wanted to go to the movies. And so I asked Sy if he would take me to the movies. And I picked it out, and I took him to see Harold and Maude. Well, he hated it. He hated it. And after that, I told him it became a cult. He still didn't care. He hated it. And he's never let me forget that we could have seen Blazing Saddles instead. And I have heard from a friend that he cheats at Scrabble. That he thinks "oi" is a word. And he is fighting with the friend who says that is not a word. So I don't know. Sy is also secretive. When he found the inscription at Ekron Mikneh, he brought it to Jerusalem, and he wouldn't let anybody see it, not even his own wife, who asked to see it, and he said no. Others have mentioned, or at least Dan did, about his scarves that he usually wears when it's warm or hot, or it doesn't matter. You can see Sy with his scarf. That seems to be his only major hang-up. It is, Sy is a hard nut to crack. Now, I was going to bring my cane and I forgot it. So let me come down. No, I've got this. So, Sy is a hard nut to crack. But if you crack him, you will find candy corn. Because he loves candy.
Well, I want to thank all of our speakers. As Bill would say, well, as I rode in Basor, so his talk it will be in Basor for us. Is that right? Okay. No? All right. Very appreciative of all these wonderful reminiscences. We have a little PowerPoint presentation in the middle of our program here. So we begin with Sy at the University of Buffalo, and you've seen that there in front of you. This is where his story starts. And this is taken from an interview that he had done with I think for the student newspaper. I don't know if that was ramping up for his Distinguished Alumni Award in 1998. I believe it was. But anyway, don't deny it. It's okay. But I love this. He was studying, he was pre-law and accounting. And it seems to me he never really got that far away from that. His CV tells us Hebrew Union College, and off to research the Hebrew University, but of course the most important thing, I like Mike. Yeah. And I have seen I Like Mike. I have seen it. You can find it. You can find it. And this inspired a whole generation across America. I Like Mike. And strangely played later in an election. Yeah, Mike Huckabee. Sy's journey. Sy's journey takes him to the master's degree in Hebrew literature, ordination as a rabbi. I still want to see this thesis. I've never seen that. He goes to Alaska, 2-year stint as a chaplain, captain in the U.S. Air Force, Alaskan Air Command, Anchorage, and rabbi. Hey, can you pick him out? Hey, baby. Where is that guy? Okay, he's in the back row, second from the right. There he is. Yeah, there you can see it again. Yeah. God, he was so good looking. What happened? Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry. He likes a big house. You can see the Air Command headquarters. This is what his role model for the Albright was. Here's his congregation. I think they must have rebuilt it after you left, but they called and wanted to know when you're coming back. Okay. From Alaska, Sy goes on as Director of Education at Temple Israel Long Beach, California. Does research, resumes graduate studies, and notice that nice 2003 Doctor of Humane Letters from HUC. The picture says it all. I love that picture. He almost looks happy. Okay. Same one there, too. Let's keep going. Okay, spring of 81. Talia, Gantova, yeah. Oh. All right, moving on to Gezer. A wonderful picture, really wonderful picture. Pick them out.
That's young guy here. There's Jack Holiday.
Jack Holiday in the front, Sy behind him.
And Jim Sterling. Hot pie hat. Middle back. Probably
All right. All right, we'll have that test later. Okay. 1980 is a big year in the life of Seymour Gitin. PhD, Syro-Palestinian archaeology, dissertation on ceramic typology, and you know who. And of course, this is going to lead on his path. There's Bill with a couple of other eminents, Frank and Phil King. And of course, we're just a few years from, this actually I think is from 75. And of course, Sy assumes the directorship in 1980. And this was for the inaugural event on Sy, in honor of Sy, in July of 80. I wish they could spell Saturday right. Now, I love this picture. I've never seen Sy so happy, and nobody else seems to be as happy as he is, and I want to know why. But what a wonderful picture. What a wonderful picture. Wow. That's Ernie. And is that Biran on the right? Yeah. Beautiful picture. Sy, why are you so happy? It's like, were you smoking something, or, kind of... Well, tonight isn't, so just hold on. I meant Biran. I'm sorry. It is Biran. I'm sorry. Right. But I just love that picture. We'll sit here for another 2 minutes. No. Okay. All right. Well, on to that site that is near and dear to the history of this whole evening, this career.
There's Joy.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Time for a change.
All right. I don't want to do this anymore.
Just a few words about Sy from the Ekron years.
You're going backwards.
Well, I went backwards. Go forwards. Well, we did go backwards in the Ekron years, let's face it. So, Sy, the Ekron years. A few words stolen from Aeneas. A few words stolen from Kansas, you know the song. A few words stolen from E. Cummings, and a few words stolen from Winston Churchill, I think go well with Sy. So, Sy, of soil and the man I sing, all we are is dust in the wind. So what if a much of a witch of a wind gives truth to a summer's day? Would all those days of blood, toil, tears, and sweat explain the mystery of McNay? Yeah. Well, tonight we honor Sy, and I just have a few things to read, so I make sure that I get it all in. Of course, it's hard to see pencil scratches in this light, but we'll do the best we can. We gather here this evening to take measure of the man, of course using a range rod, often accompanied by his partner in soil, Trudy Dotan. Sy began each day sitting with Trudy. Trudy, where's my Diet Coke? Diet Coke. And Trudy, where are my clippers? And Trudy, do you really think that's Iron One, Philistine? And Sy Dykvar, Sy Dykvar. I wish I could speak it like Trudy spoke it. Anyhow, so, and this was played out every day. And as the day wore on and Sy donned his scarf and his pipe, and the only thing missing was the ever necessary evening headlamp, which I don't think Sy ever got. So if anyone wants to give Sy the perfect gift, it's a headlamp that he can wear on his head at night to read pottery. Staff and volunteers would hang on Sy's every word. Every word. And one of the words that became important was, of course, the 8th century. The 8th century was always in need. We were looking for the 8th century, but the 8th century turned out to be very, 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 very elusive. Oil, schmoil, where's the 8th century? And this sort of became an obsession with Sy, one of many obsessions, finding the 8th century. Trudy, he would say, we need to put a stop to all this. Finally, we need to put a stop to all this. Wait, stoppers? Oh, yeah, stoppers. How well we remember stoppers. How fondly we remember those years of endless searching for stoppers. And here, I just want to add one little incident that I'm sure Sy will remember. He was so enmeshed in stoppers, and there is a fellow here sitting right back there, who owes his life to stoppers that Sy found. Anyhow, Sy would constantly be in Field 3 looking for stoppers, and one day we found this bottom of a jar, and the center of it was kind of knocked out. It was loose, and the way it just broke out that way, but the whole thing was together. So we took that middle part, and we presented it to Sy, who went absolutely ape over this stopper until we brought him the rest of it, and he was about ready to kill me at that point. It's lucky I survived. Well, stoppers was such a mania that, it led Sy to produce the stopper shuffle. He turned out to be a wonderful archaeological choreographer, and Bob Fosse can't hold a candle to this. And so I give you just a brief little bit of the stopper shuffle. You ready for this? There it is. Things of decency had to cut out the rest. So, attempting to stop stopper mania, Sy alters the excavation plan. And here we go. Altermania replaced stoppermania. And this was an alteration without an altercation, which was rare in the field of archaeology. Oh, yes. And believe it or not, Sy, in honor of altars, created yet another dance. Yes, indeed. The light shadow line dance. Who needs the Macarena? And if you look carefully, you see why and how Miley Cyrus got the idea of twerking. It all started at Mykonos, like everything else, right, Sy? So, finally, because of this dance craze, Revadim had to turn on the sprinklers to cool things down. And so Sy, with great affection, for the terrific excavation you organized and directed together with Trudy, the education you delivered, the opportunities you provided, I have but a few parting words. As you drive off into retirement, remember, you can take the car into a gear beyond second.
I have to say that's terribly enlightening for me. When I was at the Albright, I think as annual professor in the spring of '87, I inherited a van that I drove around, and I never knew why the transmission was so bad. And now I know. I didn't know that. Okay, let's continue with our PowerPoint. We have a little bit more from Ekron. I love this picture. And that brings us to the startling discovery of the inscription. And this is from an account interview with Sy. I think it's the true story, and you can see it there, wedged in a narrow space between a temple wall, etc. We turned over hundreds of stones, found no inscriptions. On this one, a few scratches. That was all. Concluding that the scratches were meaningless. I don't want to comment on that as a text person. Gitin left instructions that he be called only if an inscription was found. 10 minutes later, called back, he exclaims, "Oh my God!" It didn't really sound like Sy, did it? There were 4 very distinct letters in size in an old script. Very exciting. We couldn't read it. Every half an hour, as the moist soil covering the inscription dried, I'd brush off a little bit more, read another word. It was a very exciting process deciphering those letters. And then here we've got Trudy and Sy together.
Mark, let me interject.
No, you can't stop me.
I was going to say something serious about McNay and as a student, but I've heard enough about this inscription. Just to tell the true story, that's pretty much a falsification, and it's unique because I've never seen Sy plagiarize or make up stories before. Unlike Field 3, in Field 4, we weren't looking for stoppers, we were looking for inscriptions. And I remember the year that this was found. It was found in my field, in Field 4, and there was probably only 3 or 4 of these square blocks that I would, we thought this is going to be an inscription. I'd call Sy over and I'd tell him, Sy, I think this is it. Let's get the photographers ready. And we'd spend 3 hours excavating it. We'd flip it over. There would be nothing on it. The last, week of the excavation, we were there it's a temple now, but when we were excavating, we thought it was a Neo-Assyrian palace. We were looking at plans of Neo-Assyrian palaces. We weren't postulating that it was a temple. And this inscription was upside down. And sure enough, I called Sy over. It was after our dinner time. Oh, no, it was sometime during the day. It was hot because we couldn't see the inscription. I said, Sy, this is it. I know it's it. I can tell there's writing on it. And he denied it. He said, nope, this is not it. He went back to base camp, which is about half an hour away. We had a photographer, Elon, and he had one of those, the shade cloth things, the reflector. And so I told him, I go, Elon, you're going to have to come back in 2 hours when the sun goes down because this is going to be an inscription. We already have what I thought was, one line. And he goes, why do we need it? I can stop the sun. So sure enough, he put the reflector over it, and Elon spoke 5 or 8 languages, and he swore in all of them, and he allowed the swearing. We both knew that was an inscription. And Sherry, I know he didn't show it to you, and I knew this was what Sy would do, that he would not let anybody see the inscription. So unbeknownst to Sy, before I told him it was an inscription, I called the whole field over, all the volunteers. I called Diana Edelman, because at the time you had there was some groups saying that the Tal Dan inscription was a forgery, and I knew Diana Edelman was friends with this group, and I go, Diana, you're going to have to come over to prove that we did not forge this one inscription. And she was working in the field, so she came over, and I told the students, you are not going to see this for another couple of years because Sy's going to hide it, but I want you all to participate in this phenomenal find, the significance of it. And so I let them take pictures, but not of the inscription, just the moment of discovery, as I sat there with my legs covering it. And then I finally called Sy over, and apparently, I don't know where you got that. Was that a newspaper quote or? No, that's it. No, this was you making up this story of you finding it. Another thing we had at McNay is we taught everybody we worked as a team. Whatever you found, we all found together. And so I would just say the field supervisor found it along with the students. And I hear a lot of fundraising stories here. There was one of the students that was working in the square who was a daughter of somebody of means. And so another lie that Sy told was that the daughter found the inscription. And that was only for fundraising purposes. So every student at McNay that had a parent or relative that had potential to donate to McNay or the Albright got credit with finding that inscription. Since my parents did not have any, weren't of means, I never got credited with finding the inscription. Sorry. Yes, but that's but can I finish? I was going to go after Mark, but I'm coming up after this. Like you all, I'm learning many things about Sy, and I did not know you had an accounting degree, but it explains a lot. Working at McNay, I learned a lot about Sy, and I just got married, and I told him I'm not going to come to McNay unless my wife comes along. And we put her in the dig house, and she was the computer. She worked on the computers, and she would come every night in the tent because he didn't put me in the house. He put us in the tents there, and she would go, "Who is this crazy man? He knows everything." And he would keep track. "Oh no, we only have 36 rolls of toilet paper left. What are we going to do?" And it's like, who counts toilet paper and knows? And he could tell, like, we have, 10 students coming. We're going to need 16 rolls of toilet paper, and he had it all down to a science of what was required. I had a colleague, Tom Davis. He came on faculty with us, and he in my office, and we're telling Sy stories. And he said, as Carey director, he was part of the exchange, and he'd come over, and Sy would give him this itinerary. And he goes, it was like, at 3:37, we're going to go eat cookies. And he goes, like, why did you say 3 o'clock? And it was funny to hear, but now I know what the accounting he had every minute accounted for. But one thing I was going to speak seriously of
You don't have to do that.
No, this is my plan to you.
Okay, fine.
Sy is a great mentor, and I know as a student working at McNay, I learned a lot as I progressed. When I got my PhD, when I got my first tenure track position, I said, I'm looking for a site. And like every young student, you want just a small site. You don't want anything that's going to be splashy, something that you're not going to offend people. And I go up to Sy and I said, a small Iron Age site. I did the 11/10th. I want to look for something like this. Something like a Kerber Kayafa. Nothing that's major. And he goes, Steve, I want you to go back to Gezer. And I had no desire to go back to Gezer. It's just, Sy told me to go to Gezer. And I'm going to hold you accountable for that for the rest of my life, because there's several generations, which is a problem. But the only good thing that came out of it is Sy introduced me to Sam, saying, you need to work with Sam. And so that's probably the best thing that's come out of Gezer for me, the collegiality with Sam. But that's typical of Sy. He's always networking young scholars. He's looking for the next generation. And Sy, I want to thank you on behalf of all those that have come through McNay, all those students that have come through the Albright, that our careers would be nothing without the impact you've had on us. So thank you.
Our journey continues from Ekron out into the wider world. And one of the things that I was very impressed with as a fellow when I was at the Albright is how Sy's career, in a sense, blossomed from pottery and from Ekron, but out into the big wide world. It took him out to Spain and beyond. Here he is at the United Nations. And then, of course, family. Talia, Guntola. I love that picture. I love them all. And Sy's friends. Yeah, Wally. Wally, you look so familiar. And you think I wouldn't do something like that to you. Yes. Well, you should have known better. I could just look at that for hours. That's just plain weird, okay? Well, his birthday's the 12th of January, so this was a famous event in his life. He made a lot of money on that, by the way. Fund all kinds of fellowships for the Albright. And we, of course, we come to this place that's at the center of a lot of our lives. Sy wasn't there in 1920. Neither was Albright. Albright's there from, 1919 to 1929. Yes, he is there. Sorry, I didn't get a good resolution on that one. But we all knew who that is. I love. And of course, we've heard of his outstanding contributions. There's no need to reiterate at great length, although Sy will probably tell me later I should have. No, just kidding. Sy brings us together. I had lots of shots of classes, and I think it's really true. We see this family growing every year. I don't have every year. I have a whole bunch of years. That was out of order. And of course, in a sense, the culmination is our capacity to make this a real endowed position was a great achievement, and really it signifies the deep importance, the impact, and the legacy that's represented by your life at the Albright Sy. And this is, in a sense, the center of it all. Another picture smiling. How did that happen? Yeah, well, maybe he feels a little bit of the rabbi thing with the altars there. Okay. You brought us together. We are forever changed for our experience with you, and we thank you with all our hearts. At this point, we want to take some time with you. We have 10 minutes allotted and invite you to offer a comment or two. It wouldn't be complete without you. So if you raise your hand, well, actually, because it'll be hard to hear, if you can, dash up here. Here he comes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's the Larry Hare Show. You're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mark. You know, my wife loves to tell stories about Sy. Do you know how Sy gets everybody to work for him? Yeah, he got my wife to work for him, too. And every now and then, he would come out into the garden and say, "Denise!" Well, he did this one Shabbat. Now, my wife is a good Seventh-day Adventist, and she doesn't work on Shabbat. And so Sy comes out and says, "Denise!" And Denise, who's sitting there in a chair right under the cypress trees, says, "Sy, it's Shabbat." And Sy says, "Not all day." I think you gave us a package of Diet Cokes for that one. Seriously, one of the reasons I became an annual professor at the Albright was to meet my Israeli colleagues, and Sy facilitated that immensely, and I thank you very much, Sy.
Please, someone. Here we go. He's getting closer.
There's a very small fellowship of those of us here at ASOR who are institute directors. And I learned an immense amount from Sy. But we also shared something else, and that was Bill Deaver. And Bill moved to Cyprus, 20 minutes away. 20 minutes away with your major advisor, who still thinks you're only 30 years old. Well, one time, Bill was going to go to Israel first before he came to Cyprus. And I wake up, and the phone rings at Carrie, and I pick it up, and it's Sy. He says nothing but, "He's coming to you!"
That was really scary, wasn't it? Well, you have to come on up.
Sy is distinguished for many things.
the microphone.
No, I don't need it. Sy is distinguished for many things. One of the unique things about him is he's one of the few archaeologists ever working in the Middle East who doesn't love Scotch whiskey. And the reason why is because when we were at Turkey, we drank the well water, and he got hepatitis and has never been able to drink. And apart from the Seventh-day Adventist, he's the only sober archaeologist.
Please. Yeah, please. Annie. How lovely. There's a stairs on the other side. You don't have to leap.
Hello, everybody. My name is Annie Kobe. I'm a former curator in the Louvre Museum in Paris and a former and very happy and glad Glassman Holland Fellow at the IRR in 2011. And I just wanted to give a tribute from Paris and from France and from many French friends to Sy. So.
Please. No? Sherry, don't you want to say something? Yes, you have to live with him. Come on up.
On behalf of the younger generation from Tel Mikne, Ekron, Sy, it's not the phrase, yeah, yeah, that really matters. It's this one. May I have your attention for a few brief announcements? I just have to make one confession. Father, I have sinned. In fact, many of us have. We suspect that you know this, and you never called us on it. But once a year, during those final years of the Mikne adventure, on a given Friday evening, after you were no longer at the Albright, a select group of us would gather together in the large room in front of a television and VCR and watch an old black and white movie. We never mentioned it. We just want to let you know that you have always been entertaining and gracious. Thank you very much.
What a cowboy. What a cowboy. Yes, please. Wu Shin. Another member of the 2011 class.
Yeah, I feel I'm the last one who has the right to stand in front of everyone because that world is too far away from me, but I just want to pay tribute to Sy, who has been so great for our fellows. You tell a lot of good stories as a younger generation scholar. I am really benefited a lot from the time of being at the Albright, and also Sy has been trying to put together this fellowship program for the Chinese students, and then it's for the first time that the Albright Institute has actually, to my understanding as a Chinese, something to do with the Oriental world, which was never part of the Oriental societies. And I thank you for that. And I also thank you for what happened like 3 weeks ago. I called Sy. I said, I have to submit this paper, and I need someone to help me edit with my language. Can you do this, please? And he said, is Saturday good?
We still have time if someone would care to. Oh, yes, Claire. Claire Fan.
Well, Steve and I first met Sy and Sherry on our very first trip to Israel in July of 1980 when you were moving in, and we met the kids, and it was very exciting. Little did I know that we would return in 2 years to study in what would become a lifelong experience of living in the Holy Land 31 years later. And I worked for Sy. So I'm here tonight to speak as one of his former employees. I was his dictaphone secretary transcriber, and there were various phrases that were common lingo in addition to yeah, yeah. One of them was, "This is not English." And it was just, this is not English. And in all of my editorial tasks ever since then, I've remembered that this is not English. But I want to share a story that happened that reflects on the humanity of Sy, his wisdom, his graciousness, his gentility in handling a growing life situation as I had our second child, Shoshi. I was already working for Trudy as her editorial assistant, helping her prepare things for publication in English, a job that I had had for several years. And I was working for Sy as his secretary transcriber, a second job. And I had Shoshi, and Sy called me a few weeks after I had Shoshi, and he said, "Claire, we really have to talk about things, you know. When you have a second kid, life gets so much more complicated. You have a lot of responsibilities, and maybe it's going to be more than you can handle to work for both Trudy and me, and you need to think about how much you can actually handle." He said it in the kindest way, and then he finished it off by saying, "And you know, in any tug of war with Trudy and me, I'm always going to let Trudy win." And so I ended my days working for Sy, which was a great privilege to work with you, and I appreciated so much his wisdom and his insight and his great advice. And even though you're not old enough to be my father, at that moment you spoke to me like a dad, and I appreciated it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Claire.
Unlike many of you, I didn't meet Sy at Tel Mikne or at the Albright. I met him in Crete back in the early 1990s when I was a student, and I was helping to lead an American school trip around Crete, and we were joined by a group from the Albright that included Sy and Trudy and the students and some of the trustees. And that gave me the sort of courage to start exploring Aegean and Near Eastern interconnections on my own. But that's not what impressed Sy about me on that particular trip. A year later, I got a package in the mail, having not had any contact with Sy since then. And it was a photograph of me in a taverna arm wrestling Dan Crawford. And I won. But I'm ready for the rematch.
He's right there.
I see.
He's waiting for you. He's gunning for you.
But if it hadn't been for that trip and that chance encounter, which was a great privilege for me, I probably wouldn't be here. And there are about 60-some Australian students that never would have traveled to Israel and excavated in Israel. So, Sy, thank you so much.
Watch out, here comes Larry Garrity.
In the spring of 1971, Bill was digging at Jebel Ka'akir, and Sy came along to help him. And Jack Holliday asked Jim Strange and me to work at El Com with him. And the five of us decided to share our base camp. And between El Com and Jebel Ka'akir was a wadi that April had a flash flood. I remember that, and it was so severe that these guys couldn't go over to Jebel Ka'akir. So Bill said, let's have a gourmet meal this evening. We have extra time. And so he had drink and food that was extra special, and we had artichokes that night as our vegetable. And to cool it off, Bill poured out what he thought was water on these artichokes, and it turned out to be kerosene. So the vegetarian didn't have as much to eat that night. Remember that?
I do. Now, many of you probably don't know who I am. I'm Stuart, as in Swinney, and Sy and I both assumed directorships the same year. He became director of the Albright, as we know, and I became a director of Carey, both in 1980. I continued running Carey for 15 years, and Sy, 33 years. Now, both of us lost out. Had we been Brits, I still am a Brit, but anyhow, if I'd been running a British institute, I would have received, after 15 years, an OBE, Order of the British Empire. You, tonight, you know what you would be getting. You would be Sir Seymour Gitin, and we'd know you hereafter as Sir Seymour. And to the intimates, just Sir Sy. That sounds pretty good.
Would anyone like to follow that?
All in favor, say aye.
Sy. I don't want anyone to feel like they didn't get a nice opportunity. Someone want to say something? No? Well, please, Herschel.
I really...
Don't hold back, Herschel.
No, I really tried very, very hard to resist, and I don't... I have my own gratitude for Sy, because he always assured that even if he wasn't there, the door to the bathroom would be unlocked. And I was very grateful. But
what a guy.
And he's offered to give me a key as part of his going retirement. But Lydie Shufro called me, and we talked a little bit. And I wasn't sure I could get here tonight, and it turned out I could. And we talked about it was supposed to be a roast, and you've heard some roasting tonight. My contact with Sy was limited, so I don't have a roast. But as I sat and listened to all of you, I was awed, and I could only be silent at the honor that you've had, Sy, and what you've done to deserve it, and the way that you're regarded by all your colleagues, and is very heartwarming, and should be, as I know it is, very satisfying to you. It's something you can't be funny about, and you had a wonderful go at it.
Yeah. Thank you, Herschel. Anyone else? Please, yes! I thought if we waited long enough, we
I can't roast because I'll pay for it, so I'll be nice.
Oh, I won't either.
Yeah. So I think I'm probably the only person in the room who can say maybe I'm wrong, and I can't really say anything, who was born in a hospital and got to go to the Albright and call it her first home, which was quite exciting at the time, I guess. So I really don't have a lot of things to roast about my dad, not because he would kill me, but he probably would, except that I get to call you Seymour Gitin up here, which I'm not allowed to do at home. But I can say that I'm somebody who got to go on digs as a kid, although convinced that sifting and what is called articulating is a good job, basically sitting in the dirt all day and brushing. I was convinced that it was good. It sounded good at the time. I got to lead a lot of people. many of the people in the room at the Albright and on the dig, and that was something very exciting that I'm quite grateful as an adult to have had the opportunity. And one small story that to me says everything about my dad is a story from the Albright, and I guess I was about 6 or 7 since we moved out of the Albright when I was about 8. And my dad asked me, or somehow came about, you know, I should learn how to catch a ball, like this is what you do with your kid. So we go down to the Albright parking lot below the stairs, and my dad has some ball in his hand. I'm guessing it's a tennis ball. I don't think I knew what a baseball was for a long time. And he said, okay, I'm going to throw you the ball, and you just look at the ball, keep your eye on the ball, and you'll catch it. So he threw it, and I did what he said, and I kept the eye on the ball, and I caught it. And that was it. He said, okay, you're done. I'm going back to the office. It was good. And there you go.
What a guy! What a dad!
It's a very good dad, but I learned how to catch a ball, literally and figuratively, so always from my dad, and I appreciate that. So my little story to share.
Catch the ball.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Lane from the Council of American Overseas Research Centers, and I have to tell you a secret that you might not know. Sy Gitin is actually a Presbyterian. He will explain that to you later, but I have to say that when I took over at KORC 28 years ago, Sy was already the doyen of our group of center directors, and we went first to India in 1989, and it was a great pleasure. And it was only when I heard that Sy was retiring that I realized that I could retire too. So off we go together, Sy. Just let me know what our direction will be, and I'll be there with you. Thank you so much.
Going once, going twice.
When does he get the gold watch?
You took it from him, and you won't give it back, Bill. All right. Well, at this point, I would like to invite John Spencer to the podium for a little job. Yeah, Sy. Sy, come on up.
Be very afraid.
Okay. As many of you may know, Sy received a Festschrift in 2007. It was his peers who honored him in Up to the Gates of Ekron. However, there's another group of fat people who wanted to honor Sy and to thank him. That group was the Albright Fellows and young scholars who have benefited from Sy's help and tutelage. A total of 25 fellows wrote 19 articles, a small token of their appreciation for the many small and large ways that Sy has helped them to develop their scholarly careers. I would ask those that are here tonight who had worked in the Festschrift to please stand. We have a few of them here. So, Sy, on behalf of all the authors, my fellow editors, Bob Mullins and Aaron Brody, I am pleased to present you with Material Culture Matters.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
So, congratulations and well deserved. You're welcome.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank John for honchoing this, and the contributors to the Festschrift, and Bob and Aaron for doing basically the editing. I really appreciate all of the kind and generous and funny things that you've all said. I haven't really prepared anything, because when Liddy said, you know, something's happening tonight, a roast and a toast, she didn't tell me I had to reply. However, I do have a few small, short, brief comments. I won't comment on everything that has said, but certain things need to be addressed, Bill Deaver. Let me start with Steve Ortiz. Steve Ortiz was a maniac for stones. He would turn over any stone, small, medium, or large, and say this was going to be an inscription. So after 5 or 6 years of this, Trudy no longer came to his exhibition, but I had to go. And it was so tiring that finally, when he came across something that was real, we didn't believe it until we had it cleaned off. So Steve, all those things you said, they were wrong. Although we have to give him credit for really finding finally one very significant monumental inscription. As far as comments by Bill Deaver and Norma, I have a story. I hope they don't mind if I tell it. Do you mind? Good. If they did mind, it wouldn't make any difference. I'm telling it anyway. We had a symposium in Boston before the big one in Jerusalem. I think it was 1999. Yeah. And after all of the papers had been given, a very successful day, we had a very informal session in the evening. And there was a podium, and on the podium there were 4 or 5 people. I remember Wally was up there, Avram Biran, and Bill Deaver. And they were supposed to reminisce about archaeologists they had known who had come through the Albright, etc. And for some reason, Bill started talking about Wooly. And Wooly had a wife, Agatha Christie. Who is it? Mallowan, pardon me, but he still had a wife, Agatha Christie. It's not important about the man, it's important about the woman. Because Bill made the comment, she was, I remember, a little bit older than her husband, the archaeologist. And Bill said, you know, the archaeologist said as the wife gets older, the archaeologist appreciates her even more. Now, Norma was sitting next to me, and she shouted out, not true, Bill. Anyway, I won't make any further comments except to say one thing, that as you know, I'm retiring in July 2014. And one of the first things I plan to do is to write my memoirs. So all the things I can't say tonight, I intend to put down in that book of all the things that I have had experience for almost 40 years at the Albright, even the time before I became director, when I started with Bill as a researcher and later on as a fellow. So you'll have to really wait until that book is published. I had originally thought I would wait until some of you passed away, but the material is so good, I can't wait. Thank you again.
Right.